All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Neck Up Live. And our guest this evening is Mr. Pat Rigsby. Pat Rigsby is a 1990 graduate of Portsmouth High School, where he would go on to play college baseball at Wittenberg University and eventually find himself back home at Shawnee State University. Following his playing career, he became an assistant coach at Shawnee State. And in 1995, at the age of 23 years old, he became the youngest college baseball coach in the country when he was named the head baseball coach at Shawnee State. 1995 was a heck of a year for Pat. Prior to being named the head coach, he also played for the Frontier League Portsmouth Explorers, where he hit .316. And then a few months later, you were named the head baseball coach at Shawnee State at 23 years old. So, Pat, welcome to the show.
Man, that's a flashback there. So thanks for having me, guys.
So I always like to ask, especially from my hometown, our hometown, me, you, and I forgot to mention with my co-host Eugene Collins, as always. But we all grew up in Portsmouth, Ohio. And I just like to hear a little bit about your upbringing in Portsmouth and maybe, what made you fall in love with the game of baseball?
I think I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to start playing like in first grade, right? Minor league over at Mound Park. And it was just one of those great community things where, parents would go and support their kids and, just play minor league, little league, senior league through like Northern Division. And then during all the times that you weren't in those structured game environments, I'm playing neighborhood ball with a bunch of people who ended up being really great athletes. Aaron Duncan, who ended up being a Hall of Famer at Shawnee State, and is now the baseball coach at Portsmouth. Chris Duncan, who, an all-state wide receiver that went on to play college football. I mean, we just had great neighborhood games. And it was just, you play tennis ball style baseball in the street until it's football season, then you play football, then you play basketball, and you just kind of cycle through it. And I just happened to just fall in love with baseball. I mean, the Reds were, kind of coming out of their peak Big Red Machine when I was kind of just getting introduced to baseball. And so I was a big fan of Johnny Bench and Tom Seaver. And, and it was, you couple that with growing up in a community where you've got at some points 4 major league all-stars in the 70s from our area. It was just a great environment to fall in love with the game. And if you were curious about baseball, if you were interested in baseball, there was no shortage of it to be found around you.
So I'm going to go back. I didn't mention some of your resume, but only mentioned bits and pieces. But I'm going to go back to your coaching career. Like I said, 1995, you were named the head baseball coach, the youngest coach in the United States of America. You coached from 1995 to 2002 with a career record of 194 and 86. Your teams led the nation in hitting multiple seasons. And during your tenure as a college baseball coach, your teams collectively hit .364, which is the highest in the nation during that time. So I want to go back to that 1995. I'd just like to know what your mindset was when you're 23 years old and you're named the head baseball coach. And you may have had some players that were your age. So what was your mindset when you were given the keys to the Shawnee State baseball program?
To be fair, I was terrified. But I also saw it as an opportunity that I was at least aware enough that 23-year-olds didn't get. I mean, case in point, if I'm the youngest head coach in the country, I'm the only 23-year-old getting that opportunity, right? So knew that I was kind of jumping in the deep end of the pool and would have to kind of learn to swim while I was doing it. And just felt like, this is an opportunity you can't pass up. And so I just I think for my entire adult life, my coping mechanism whenever I've been faced with something like a stressful situation is like solution seeking. So I just went out to find as many, people that I could lean on and ask questions of as possible. And you were clearly one of those people. And because of my relationship with you and because of some of the coaches in the area, the Dennis Haggertys, the Dean Schulers, and obviously John Tipton's, I was able to reach out to Bob Morgan, who's your college coach, and he deserves all sorts of credit for taking my call and offering me some help when he had no real reason to. And I called a number of coaches, and throughout my coaching career, I called kind of a who's who of people in college baseball and just asked questions of. I kind of cold called people like Gordy Gillespie, who at the time was the winningest coach in college baseball divisions, and also if you're a fan of the movie Rudy, he was Rudy's high school football coach. I called people like Jim Morris, who was at Miami of Florida, Danny Hall, who was at Georgia Tech, and down the line. And they were all very accommodating, very kind and generous. And, I just started asking questions and tried to learn, because I was very, very aware of the fact that I just didn't know a whole lot at that point.
Pat, how did you go about getting some of the Division I players to come to Portsmouth that you got? Because you got several that were Division I rosters and came to Shawnee and was very, very good.
It took me a couple of years to kind of find my bearings, like recruiting wise, and understand what I could actually offer. I got the job because the university at the time was pursuing a Division III membership. They were not going to offer scholarships. So the previous coach, Jeff, all of our high school baseball coach, John Tipton, left the position, and it obviously wasn't a really appealing job at that point, because you're playing still in a NAI, a division that offered at the time 12 full scholarships, or up to 12 full scholarships, and we were going to be offering none. And so the first couple of years I was just kind of scrambling, and then I just thought about it from a different angle, looked at it through a different lens, and said, okay, well, what can we sell? What do we have to offer that may be unique to us? How can we play to our strengths? Because Shawnee State University had some strengths, and maybe scholarship money wasn't one of those strengths, but it had a low cost of attendance. It had a sports management major that was appealing for some of the people who were there. I was able to maybe market a different style of play and maybe a different approach to player development than a lot of people were looking at. And, all the coaches that I might have been coaching against were more experienced, more seasoned, probably better strategists than I was. But I was young, and I was willing to do some things from a player development standpoint. Like, we were really progressive in the strength conditioning side of things. We approached a really aggressive style of offense, when at that time it was still kind of in vogue to be a bunt and hit and run small ball type of team. And that was appealing to young people who wanted to hit home runs and wanted to steal bases. So I just started marketing that, and I took advantage of the fact that, I was single, I was young, I didn't have a family. So it was fine to be calling California at 11 o'clock at night, recruiting kids, or, just running off and watching a game in Columbus or in Dayton or something like that, when somebody who may have been further along in life had family responsibilities they were going to do after practice. And so I just kind of leaned into that. And fortunately, we got some good players, and it created a bit of a snowball effect. People like to be part of a winner, and we started winning. We started putting up pretty good stat lines as a team, individuals did. And so that was attractive to other people to come in as well.
So, Pat, we've been best friends for over 40 years. So and I've got to know you on a different level than probably anybody else. I've always admired your ability to think outside the box and take chances and take risks. So I remember you telling me the story that you kind of at one point realized you were not going to be the High Dominican of Mount Vernon doing what they do, but not only doing what they do, but what they've been doing for decades. So tell me about that epiphany that you had where you're like, look, I'm going to do things different. And I'll let you tell the story, but you started spending your own money, traveling, kind of maybe touch on teaching the blast hitting system, which is the way hitting is taught now, and you were teaching it 20, 30 years ago. So tell me a little bit about that process.
So my second year, we went 27-16, which was by far the best season in school history at that point. But we lost I think 10-1 to Ohio Dominican in the conference tournament. And it just kind of just was this aha moment of man, there's no way we're going to be able to close that gap doing what they do. We're not going to be able to play the same style of baseball they do and win. We're not going to be able to develop players the same way they do. And Mount Vernon was the same way. Mount Vernon was incredibly successful. At one point, their entire starting rotation ended out, playing professional base or pitching at the professional level. So I said, okay, well, let's just kind of assess where we are. What do we have? And kind of like I touched on a moment ago, there were some opportunities and there were some potential strengths. And I was somebody who really gravitated to the strength and conditioning side of things and was kind of a progressive thinker that way, and definitely not afraid to just kind of turn over every stone and try anything. And probably be more aggressive than they would have been if it would have been even professional baseball, where it's kind of do no harm, right? And so I started to just chase things down. I went to LSU and studied what they were doing hitting wise. Jim Shawnee was the hitting coach there. Talked to him on multiple occasions about what they did. I talked to Turtle Thomas at Miami of Florida, who was a renowned hitting coach and had a lot of the same philosophy. Shawnee had packaged it up and marketed it some, but kind of similar approaches. And I said, okay, how do we adapt that to what we do? And then just got really aggressive with the way that we approach strength and conditioning. And you combine those two things and you get, this confidence and this aggressive approach where, man, we'll do things that maybe other people aren't doing. We'll go over and work on hitting the ball on a slow pitch softball field with backspin to the opposite field and try to hit the ball out there. A mentality of how do we, with two strikes, hit a home run to the opposite field type of approach. And I'm overgeneralizing, but it just, it was like, let's just kind of push the chips to the center of the table, because I know that we're always just going to be above average if we try to do it this other way. And if we're going to try to be great, we're going to have to just solve problems differently and pursue goals differently than everybody else does. You couple that with the fact that we didn't have scholarship money until my fifth year. And at that point, we had 1.7 scholarships. But 4 years in, it's like, we're not going to get top end pitchers. We're not going to get the marquee shortstop most of the time, right? Like we're going to have to beat people 13-10 or something like that. And so we just kind of said, hey, this is what we're going to do. I kind of sold the players on it as best I could. And thank goodness they bought into it and they liked that approach. And, first weekend of the season, we go out there and hit 9 home runs and they're on board. Right. So, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
Well, your group was fun to watch, and actually, it was more fun to get to batting practice and watch the likes of Brandon Doss, like hitting balls like 425 feet. It's amazing to watch him and some of your other guys just hit home run after home run after home run, and in batting practice, it was like you were almost watching the Reds.
We were so fortunate to be able to assemble such a good group of players, and they were kind of internally competitive. They created their own culture where they made one another better. I mean, you had guys. I had I had Josh Hamilton tell me that Dan Grummett hit the ball farther than anybody else he ever played with.
Mm-hmm.
And, you had guys like Brian Harrison, who's gone on to be, one of the best coaches in college baseball, taking his team to 3 World Series at Baldwin Wallace. I mean, he was an incredible hitter for us. And Brandon was the most intimidating leadoff hitter in the country. I mean, we just had such a talented group, but it's not just that they were talented. I mean, they just fed off of one another. And there was this culture of, man, if you're in this lineup, it means you can hit. And
right.
it was fun to watch as a fan, let alone as a coach.
Pat, another thing that I always admired is I think in the high school program we came up in, John Tipton, the Hall of Fame coach, very, very good, successful high school program. My college career at Indiana, again, Bob Morgan, another great coach. But I thought we were very robotic. And then you coach and you allowed people to play let their personality just play out. And you created a culture where, hey, you be who you are, which was different. So, why did you do that? And was that hard for you to not kind of do things the way we were probably taught, you were taught? And to me, I saw it as a big advantage for you. So, can you expand on that a little bit?
So my first couple of years, I kind of tried to be that. I tried to be a little bit Bob Morgan-esque. And that was hard for me because it was not my default personality. It was not the way that I thought about things. I mean, I knew well enough growing up beside you that everybody's got different skills and talents. And I wasn't going to be the explosive athlete you were or whatever else, but was there a way for me to maximize whatever potential I had? And it probably wasn't going to be following the exact same blueprint that you did, or Aaron Duncan did, or Michael Eastep did, or any of these people. And I think that if you look at players in the big leagues, you recognize that pretty quickly, right? I mean, Aaron Judge and Jose Altuve probably shouldn't be doing everything exactly the same if they're going to maximize their potential. One of them is going to be limited by that. Mm-hmm. And, if you've got a crafty left-handed pitcher and then you've got a tall right-handed flamethrower, again, they shouldn't take that same approach. And I know a former teammate of yours, a friend of yours, Derek Johnson, who's the pitching coach for the Reds, talks about be great at what you're good at. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I was eloquent enough to say it that way, but that's kind of the way that I thought about things all along. It's like, man, you can't make the Corey Hogels or Shannon Zimmermans that we had that were small, 155-pound players. They weren't going to be Dan Grummett or Jason Pratt or Brian Harrison or anything like that. And it was silly to say, you guys do everything the same, because somebody's going to miss out on maximizing their potential. And frankly, if you try to split the difference, they're both going to miss out, right? So that just, for whatever reason, made sense to me. Mm-hmm. And I tried the first couple of years because I didn't really have an identity as a coach at that point to be somebody I wasn't. And then again, after that kind of second year, I was just very much at peace with the fact that if we're going to be any better, I'm going to have to approach things differently.
Mm-hmm. Pat, so like I mentioned before, you were someone that thought outside the box. I consider you a risk taker. You take chances. So after your coaching career, you became an entrepreneur. You've developed multiple Fortune 500 companies. You've authored 6 best-selling books. You've been featured in Men's Health, USA Today, and hundreds of other media outlets. You've also involved in a production of a movie. You've done so much as an entrepreneur. So how did your baseball career, your coaching career, what skills did you use in your entrepreneurial career?
I think that almost anything that's gone well in my business life kind of found its roots in my time coaching, or maybe even before that playing. From selling and marketing, kind of having their foundation in recruiting, to just problem solving and dealing with people and understanding that relationships aren't transactional. That's one of the great things about being a coach, right? It's a transformational relationship. It's this kind of partnership in this journey where as a coach, you get to play this, hopefully small but meaningful role in somebody's maturation and development. And I think that I was able to appreciate that a lot getting into the entrepreneurial world where so much of it is very transactional. And so I think it helped me maybe have more empathy. It helped me understand who I was trying to serve or to work with or collaborate with better, or at least attempt to. I think that so much of the things that you're doing coaching a team are very transferable to the small business world, which is really the part of it that I understand. I mean, there are plenty of people out there with publicly traded companies that it's well beyond my grasp, but for small businesses, it's like, okay, let's recruit people into what we're doing and let's create a win-win situation for them where you help them get what they want. And in turn, hopefully you get something that you want. And if you do a good job with people and build a relationship over time, that's something that gives you some longevity. And so I think in a lot of the business kind of lanes that I've operated in, longevity's kind of been an outlier. And so just, building relationships and sticking around has maybe made me a little bit unique. But again, that's all rooted in coaching. If somebody's your player and you care about them as a coach, they're always your player. I mean, I talked to Ted Tom that played for me and was later a great baseball coach at Shawnee State this morning. And, I think that's maybe one of the greatest joys I've had as a coach. And maybe I didn't appreciate that as a 22, 23, 25-year-old coach, but as a 52-year-old now, the fact that I still get to connect with people that I coached back then, it certainly outshines any on the field accomplishment.
Pat, do you see, obviously I see a lot of similarities in you're willing to chase guys that nobody else would have thought you could have got at Shawnee because of no money or no budget. Do you find that has helped you be successful in business of chasing things that people would have thought, man, no way he could do that, or no way that could happen?
Yeah, I think that we're on a mental performance podcast, right? I mean, I think that a lot of the times we have to understand that our limitations are self-imposed, right? And if you don't believe that you can do something, it's hard to get other people to do it. But I mean, from my perspective, even dating back, to recruiting, there was no downside for me because I definitely had more time. I had more that was my probably most valuable resource. I had more time because I was young and single. You know, so I could go pursue a lot of these players. And you know what? I knew that, hey, maybe they don't come here initially, but if they don't have a great experience somewhere else, then potentially they come back and, you know, land with us later on. Or, you know what, if they're playing summer ball with somebody and that person's considering us, then they're going to hopefully speak well of us because, you know, I had a decent relationship with them. So I just didn't really focus on the downside very much. And I think that in the business world that I've operated in since, it's like, man, I mean, why not? Like, why not me? Why not you guys? Why not? I mean, I think there are plenty of opportunities available to all of us. It's a matter of, are we willing to bridge the gap from where we are to actually realizing those opportunities? And that's just putting in the work.
Right. Right.
You know, it's funny, Gene, you asked that question as we're speaking. I'm kind of making some notes, so maybe questions to ask. And I was going to ask you, Pat, the Netflix series Second Chance U. I look at Shawnee State baseball and your tenure as Second Chance University, and I think you gave a lot of guys an opportunity that maybe didn't get the opportunity even out of the gate, or maybe they went somewhere else and failed. You know.
Well, and you know what, to kind of piggyback on that, and you know, I look at one of your players, Trevor Vaught, who came out of Kent McKinley and Ohio State, and he played for you. And I think a guy like Trevor Vaught kind of put Shawnee on the map, because a lot of times you would get guys that say, you know, Shawnee, you don't really have to be good to play there. But then when you see a guy like Trevor and his partner that plays shortstop, the Smith guy, like, you go watch them guys play, and they're like, you got Division I guys playing at Shawnee. And so Shawnee's not just a place now where you can go. You got to be good. You got to be good to play there. So I think a guy like him, you know, along with Brandon, kind of really helped Shawnee, and you guys turned the page in terms of the quality of athlete that was playing for Shawnee.
Yeah, you know, I think I really liked leaning into, and I'm not suggesting like every era of Shawnee State athletics kind of has their own vision for who they want to attract and the university, what they want the brand to be. But at that time, I felt like it was such a welcoming environment for somebody to come in and maybe get a reset, right? And say, hey, maybe the first stab at this didn't go exactly how you wanted, whether it was academically or athletically. But I mean, you're a young person, right? I mean, the number of screw ups I had as an 18, 19, 20-year-old, whatever, you know, you're a lot of times you're short-sighted, you're kind of in the moment. And it's like, man, that shouldn't be this anchor that drags you down forever. And I felt like, just like, you know, some of the higher end private schools had their identity and who they wanted to attract. I felt like for us, it was just such a good environment, a welcoming environment for that. I think that, you know, Portsmouth was not this, you know, overwhelming environment like Columbus, where there were as many distractions or whatever else. And, you know, we were able to bring a lot of people in there that, you know, I don't know that they would have gotten degrees otherwise. I mean, maybe they have. I don't want to sell them short, but, you know, I think that being able to come there and be in an environment where they were enjoying playing baseball, so they were, you know, they had that kind of carrot in front of them to keep them, you know, accruing credits and moving towards a degree. You know, I think that so many of them, it set them on the right path. And, you know, unfortunately, not all of them did it work, but I think I'd rather cast a wide net and help hit reset for, a number of them that works. And if some of them doesn't, at least we tried, right?
Absolutely.
Pat, you had a chance to look at our journal. It's called a mental performance journal for athletes, but really Gene and I's main goal was to help them create habits, learn how to manage their time, make good choices so that they can become productive citizens. And Gene always talks about this, that we're coaching guys not to make them better basketball players or baseball players, but to get a W-2.
Oh.
But you get a 1099 because you're an entrepreneur, right? So I think our education system, we train people to get W-2s, but can you help any of the young athletes out there that want to be entrepreneurs, that want to go get a 1099? Can you give them some advice and on maybe how they could do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, I know you've referenced risk taker a couple of times, right? I think all along I wanted to have a little bit more control over my own outcomes, or I think that working in a university environment at the time, you're kind of at the mercy of whatever the budget is, and the budget is certainly bigger than your program, how they have to navigate it. And I just didn't love it. I didn't love kind of being at the mercy of so many moving parts that I had no control over. And so I wanted a little bit more control. And so for me, it was going out there and saying, okay, where can I combine my strengths and my skills and my experiences with a problem that can be solved, like a problem that other people really want to solve. And the bigger the problem people have, or the more common the problem people have, the more valuable the solution, right? And I think that there are plenty of those opportunities out there for people if they want to pursue that. And I think that, you can go to a university and gain some useful education towards being entrepreneurial. I think that the thing that you just can't replace, though, is going and kind of getting in the game, and maybe interning for somebody, for kind of doing a mentorship with somebody a little bit and seeing how that stuff works. Because I mean, it's like the old Mike Tyson quote, right? Like, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the mouth. Well, I mean, the real world of business, like, it invariably there are problems or challenges that you're just not prepared for in a textbook environment. But I think what's great about the journal, and mind you, 1994, I went to a Franklin Quest, before it was Franklin Covey, seminar at Shawnee State University, and have used a paper planner ever since. So, I mean, I'm right on, kind of right on track with what you guys are doing with the journal myself. And, we're talking basically, 30 years later, I still am kind of very much dependent or interwoven with that kind of journal, that kind of planner approach. Because if you want to be successful, whether it's as an entrepreneur or as an employee, you have to control your time and you have to control your priorities. And I think that the more the structure isn't created for you, which in many jobs it is kind of imposed on you, in the entrepreneurial world sometimes you're having to self-impose it, the more important this stuff becomes. You have to make sure that you get your most important priorities accomplished. If you're trying to go move a business forward, there are always going to be plenty of things that are kind of pulling you away from your top priorities. There are always going to be fires to put out, to-dos to check off. But if you want to really move things forward, you're going to have to control that. Hey, the most important stuff got done each day. And for me, I love the physical journal, because I spend so much of my time. I mean, Jeff, you've seen it, and Gene, you've seen it probably a little bit too. I mean, my business is kind of carried in a backpack in many cases, right? I can take my computer, my phone, pretty much anywhere at this point and run stuff. But if I log on, sometimes I'm having to be reactive.
Mm-hmm.
But if I say, okay, me working from my planner, that's my time. I get to be proactive. I get to make sure I'm focused on the things that are priorities for me. And, I'm not here engaging, kind of trying to pare down my inbox or reply to questions coming in or whatever else. So, yeah, so much of the stuff that you have the luxury of learning in an athletic environment carries on. But I think what's great about people learning it in athletics is it's kind of hiding the medicine in the applesauce, right? Like you're learning to prioritize things and work on stuff that's important to you because you really love the sport that you're playing. Hopefully, I mean, I know I walked in here to jump on with you guys from having some of our. I've coached my younger son Alex's travel baseball team for a while, and then before that, Tyler's. I mean, this is like year 32 of coaching, but a lot of the kids have school related strength and conditioning programs, but we had like 3 that didn't. So we had them here at our house working on that, and they're wanting to come get better. I mean, they want to improve. So we want to create opportunities to improve, but that stuff's going to carry over. Like, hey, if something's important to you, you put in the time. You don't just show up and expect the outcome. Well, you guys are teaching people. You're using sports as a vehicle to teach habits and behaviors and skills that'll carry over forever. So, I mean, kudos to you.
Thank you.
Pat, you said you're still coaching. How's the game changed? And the changes that you see, do you think they're good or bad, or is it a mixture?
I've coached for a long time. I've coached everything from T-ball on up, right? I've been involved with baseball at every level that pretty much there is, I guess. And the game has changed and evolved, and I think it's a personal preference thing. But I mean, pretty well that I'm a bit of a student of the game, a historian or whatever. The game's always evolved, right? But people tend to latch on to whatever they grew up with, whatever their favorite kind of window of time was, and then everything's downhill from there, right? Like, and I'm not going to be the old curmudgeon that sits here and says, well, it was better then or better. I mean, you know what? It's always going to be in a state of evolution. And there are things about it that I really like now. I like the fact that people are taking development very seriously and that people are more creative in how they're approaching player development, because that was something that I really gravitated to, 25 years ago. But I mean, there are things about the game that, I mean, I would love to see more action at the major league level and fewer strikeouts. And, I had Tom Seaver was one of my favorite players. The game isn't quite as starting pitcher friendly anymore. At the younger level, honestly, there are things that are good about it. I mean, the 14-year-olds, 13, 14-year-olds that I have now are so experienced, and they understand nuances of the game that I wouldn't have. I mean, Jeff, you've seen Alex's team play. They're pretty darn good. It's not just them. I mean, the level has elevated because that's just the competitiveness thing, right? But I would say that you can trace pretty much all of the things that people don't like about like youth athletics, travel athletics, back to adults kind of making it about them and not about the players, adults being short-sighted and being more concerned with winning a weekend tournament than the long-term development of the kid. I personally believe that travel or club sports or scholastic-based sports done well can be a real valuable component of facilitating sound mental health for young people. I think that when you talk to mental health professionals about the things that kind of chip away at young people's mental health, too much screen time or lack of community or true connection or whatever else, all of those things, we can be a positive kind of force in sports, right? I mean, they're out there connecting with teammates. They're learning to be a good teammate. They're learning to work within the confines of an organization. You're building connections with other people. Just like, I built connections with both of you guys through sports. Obviously you're not on a screen if you're on the field. And so there are so many positives, and in many cases, kind of low consequence ways to learn how to deal with adversity. I mean, striking out in the whole grand scheme of things is not a big deal.
Right.
But learning to control your response to that is a skill that's going to pay dividends later. And I don't think enough adults view the role they can have in a positive way in youth sports. They think about player development being about, can my kid throw 90, or can my basketball player score 28 points a game or whatever else, and are we going to win this weekend, instead of caring about the young people that you're serving and trying to develop them holistically. Because let's face it, even for the best of them, Jeff was as good an athlete as I was around growing up, but professional sports had a pretty short window for Jeff, right? And then he had to go on and, be a healthy contributing member of society for a long time after that. Well, we can do so much for that. And I think we're barely scratching the surface, and in some cases kind of pulling the rope in the other direction as a whole.
Pat, I kind of see it now as a guy that really loves baseball. At the major league level, I can remember growing up, and I'm telling my age, but I can remember the end of the Bob Gibson and the Sandy Koufax, where those guys went out and they threw 9-inning games. Those days are over, and they're over because you're spending millions and millions of dollars on that number one pitcher, and they're going to always be on a pitch count because they're protecting their arms. And so, everybody's getting upset because pitchers are only going 5 innings or 6 innings. But I think these owners are now challenged with, I got to protect the Hunter Green's arm. I can't have him throwing, the innings like they used to throw back in the day. And so I think those days are gone, on one hand. And I think players and parents are going to have to understand that. And then the other piece that I think parents are going to have to understand is their kids need to become diversified. They don't need to just be the shortstop, or they don't need to just be the catcher. They need to learn to play all those positions, because the more positions you learn how to play, the more valuable you are.
Yeah, I think, the game's always going to evolve. All the games are going to evolve, right? The quarterbacks in football now have plenty of rules designed to prevent them from getting hit. There was a point in time that the 3-point line didn't exist in basketball.
Right.
That's just, there are always going to be interventions in sport designed to keep it competitive and deal with the caliber athletes we're playing and the money that's involved. And I think for me, I've just continued to say, look, I'm not big on, griping about kind of turning back the clock and saying this is how things used to be and they should be that way. Things used to be, we didn't have penicillin, and we didn't have vaccines for
Right.
polio. And I mean, come on,
Yeah.
like the world keeps evolving and either you adapt to it or you're going to be really frustrated because it's going to keep moving.
That's right.
You know, kind of build off a couple things you guys said. You referred to parents. And I think sometimes, it's been said that the kids haven't changed, but the parents have. And, I think there might be a little bit of truth to that. But I do think this journal can be very useful for parents of players, coaches, and not only players, just to help them give some perspective. And I know as a parent myself, if my daughter was playing, I was probably more anxious and worried more than I did as a coach or a player because I wanted her to do well so bad and I believed in her so much. So I do think that this journal could be a benefit to parents and coaches, not only players.
Yeah. I mean, I think that as a parent, you want so many good things for your kids. You don't want to see them fail. You don't want to see them struggle. And sometimes we aren't great in manifesting like a supportive way to do that because our anxiety gets the best of us or our challenges get the best of us. And I think we've all watched our kids go out there on a court or on a field and I was way more nervous for my boys going and playing than I ever was as a player or coach. And it's a good way for us to keep things in context and understand maybe when we let emotions get the best of things or understand where we let adverse situation like we have to model how we handle adversity because they're going to feed off that, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to be like, you can't be the one sitting there saying, okay, the officials are always to blame and then expect them not to pick up on that.
Right.
And the other thing about it, if you're in a situation where you've got the trust of the athlete and you can kind of share journal experiences, right? Like you can say, well, let me know what you're feeling because sometimes people aren't great at expressing themselves verbally. Sometimes, they can put stuff down and you can better understand how to coach them, how to parent them, how to teach or mentor them. I mean, it's a very much a Swiss Army knife here, right? Like, I mean, you're just saying, here's a framework for us to talk about and improve on things that are going to matter in every facet of your life. And sports is kind of that doorway for us to get started with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Pat, you've been great. I think you threw out a lot of good information. Do you have anything else that you would like to add or you think it's important to share?
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you guys for not only putting together the journal because I know that I got to see kind of the early stages of development, seeing how that worked, and I know how much work goes into that, and the impact that both of you guys wanted to make for young people, kind of beginning in Southern Ohio and kind of just snowballing from there. But also for putting together this podcast, you've had a bunch of really interesting guests on, a bunch of people who shared, wisdom from all angles to recent like high school athletes all the way to, long since retired NBA players and coaches. And I think that's such a really valuable way for people to connect and hear everybody's different sets of experiences because I don't know that I shared anything that's gonna be profound to anybody, but I'm pretty sure that if they go through all these episodes, they're going to take away some really valuable lessons somewhere. They're going to connect with one of those presenters, speakers, guests, and maybe more. And, just creating a platform to talk about this stuff, to share things. It goes so far because the more, mental health for athletes, the more the that's talked about, the more that people understand that it's okay not to be okay,
Right.
and that we all deal with challenges and fears, and that there are solutions and people out there to help you through it. Hopefully, the more forward progress that everybody makes.
Well, Pat, I just want to thank you again. I talk to Jeff about this all the time. We just don't give enough credit to another Portsmouth High School alumni that's went on, that's, left the area, that's become successful. I know you're kind of like I am. You're not one that wants people tooting your horn, but again, you came through the same school system I did, and our school system always has this rap of not being able to produce. And again, you're just another great example of someone who figured it out, got it right, coming through the walls of Portsmouth High School. And I just appreciate what you've done, and, continued success, my man.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the kind words. And I think I was incredibly fortunate we had good people all around us, good teachers, good parents that, not just your parents, but other people who kind of cheered you on and supported you in coach teams. And it was a wonderful kind of springboard for me, that I've been very, very consistent and happy to share with my kids, because I want them to experience some of that too.
Yep.
Pat, thank you again. You've been probably the best friend a guy could have. But I definitely have always just admired your ability to, like I said, think outside the box and have the no fear mentality. Definitely a lot different than what I have. And I always tell people all the time, I helped you your first 2 years as a coach at Shawnee State. I think we did okay, but I think it was a good thing that I left. And I don't think you would have done as well if I would have stayed around, because, I was definitely kind of set in my ways, very robotic, and I didn't really think outside the box like I should have. But as I've gotten older, I think you've rubbed off on me, and I've been able to do some things, and I definitely attribute that to you and the things I've learned from you. So I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you. And man, I don't think I'd have made it through the first 2 years if you weren't over there kind of steering me back on track anytime I was ready to go off the rails there. So
you could have used this Athlete's Mental Performance Journal back then.
Oh man, it would be a lifesaver, right? And I'm sure all the guys could have really benefited from it, having to deal with a 23, 24-year-old head coach. So thanks to them for weathering the storm, right? So no, I appreciate you guys very much.
All right, Pat. Thank you, and wish you the best of luck. And I'm sure we will talk very soon.
Yeah. All right, you guys.